Gress.
All right, I will gavel in the February committee Ways and Means meeting. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice. Here. Alderman Erger.
Here.
All members present.
Great, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to review changes, additions, objection to approving by acclamation? All right, it'll stand approved. Item 3 of the agenda is report of the committee chair and alderman. I have no report. Alderman Gould.
No report.
Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderman Erger. No report. All right. Item 4, city administrator appears to have no report, so we'll move on. Item 5 is the department reports. 5A is the investment report. Do we have anyone?
Brad is.
There's Brad.
Boy, you guys are efficient.
I got dinner reservations.
Happy New Year, everyone.
New Year.
Yes, thank you. I have just a one-page summary for you guys. And if you remember, what we've done is we've started implementing, of course, monthly earnings. But then since this is the first month of the new year, we gave you a consolidated report. So I'm hoping that you all have that. Are you able to see that?
We have it in our board docs.
Perfect. I'll start upside down, start at the very bottom. The bottom little spreadsheet there shows you all the earnings in all of the accounts since we started our relationship. And that was October 11th of 2018. And that those earnings went all the way through until December 31st of 2023. And you see in all the funds and accounts, you earned a total of approximately $2,745,000. If we scroll up to the center spreadsheet, this is what we've been reporting on all of last year. And all those combined in the 14, 17, 18, and 19 bond debt service reserve fund accounts, plus all of the money that we manage in your general fund, has earned all of last year $728,000. In addition to that, the month of January, the 4 accounts, the 2014 COPs have fallen off. They have been refunded. And those 4 accounts this month have earned $63,000. So we add them all up since the beginning of when we started working with you, it's a little over $3.5 million in just interest earnings, which is wonderful. I'll give you a little bit of an investment or market update. I always like to do that. And we talk a lot about the Federal Reserve lowering the Fed funds rate. They started that back in September. They've done it 3 times. They've lowered the Fed funds rate about 1%. And what we have seen really the last 2 years is what we call an inverted yield curve. So I'll do it with my arm here. Short-term rates actually gave you a higher yield than longer-term rates, completely backwards. And with the lowering of the federal fund rate, it's brought down bond yields to kind of a flat yield curve. So in addition to that, here in probably the last 3 weeks, maybe a month, we've started to see a more natural yield curve where if you're, and this goes to common, just, everyday thinking. If you're willing to tie your money up a little bit longer, you should get a higher yield for that. And that's how it's always been, or almost always been, except for the last 2 years when the Federal Reserve kind of artificially pumped up the short-term rates. So we're starting to see longer-term rates rising a little bit, which is nice to see a more normalized yield curve. And that'll probably continue as short-term rates decline with the Fed lowering the Fed funds rate. So that's my little market tidbit for you. I'll open it up if anybody has any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Alderman Gould?
Sometimes you give us a month over month kind of trend and the comparison. This last month seems like it's still maybe a gain from the last couple of months that we've seen, or is it holding pretty steady? How does that look? The
I think for
60,
the
the
most
63,000.
Yeah, for the most part, we've been in the $60,000 range. I think one month, if I remember last year, we dipped into like 58,000 and as high as 70 or 71,000.
Okay.
And that's just, sometimes money isn't able to be reinvested, or there has been an overall decline in investments all around. So that could be some of it also. But yeah, it'll kind of fluctuate, and that's pretty close to the average. I didn't do it this month. I will do it next month because this is the first
Yeah.
month of the year.
Right.
So next month I'll have this report along with just a January and a February graph like you're used to seeing.
Then for those who might look at this as far as rates change and the short term maybe isn't as profitable, I guess, can you just explain that how the city is protected by how we've set these up?
Yes, great question. We're talking about this a lot with clients because a lot of times they have probably actually 20 minutes ago, I got off the phone with a client that had too much money sitting in their money market account. And so we started coming up with a strategy to get it invested and protected, protecting the earnings because the Federal Reserve has lowered the Fed funds rate. That means the money market rates have declined about 1% in the last 4 months. So by investing this money, you're locking it into a fixed rate of return. Both Bola and Michelle and I have pretty regular conversations about all this stuff. The number one thing that we discuss is whenever something is maturing, especially in the general fund, do you need this money? Do you have an expenditure on the horizon that we need to leave it liquid and not invested? And then sometimes you do, sometimes it makes most sense to reinvest it and protect the earnings and, in that portion of the portfolio. But yes, 100% with the fluctuating checking account rates, savings account rates, both with the city and all of us personally, we've all seen those rates decline, and they will always be subject to the whims of the Federal Reserve making monetary policy changes. And then also with the bank, every bank is going to respond differently. So if you can lock it in for whatever the period of time, you can forecast those earnings and protect those earnings from a fluctuating money market environment.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good question.
Not seeing any other questions. It's always nice to hear the good news from you, Brad.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me and carving out time and for allowing us the ability to work with you guys.
Great. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Right.
All right, we'll move on. 5B is the financial statements.
In your packet are the November 2024 financial statements. Are there any immediate questions before I sort of cover some of the highs and lows? Once again, this covers November. December stays open a little longer because we wait until February based upon the accruals that we do with the auditors and other assessments and waiting on St. Louis County. So as of November, the use tax has superseded the budget. The motor fuel tax has, the gas and electric, occupational licenses. Once again, there are some that have already by November sort of superseded the budget, and I'm pretty confident sales tax is going to get there as well. I know it looks low in November, but once again, we wait for January and February to move some of these numbers back, including the road and bridge tax and the ad valorem tax. So these aren't fully solid numbers just based upon the method of accounting that we do. And then once again, with Brad coming on, good timing in the interest income. As of November, general fund had $387,000 of that $600,000 that was in there for general, but we distributed among all the funds, general, park, stormwater, and capital for interest income. all of the salaries and all of the expenditures per department. By November, we have fully inherited the compensation study and the retro, as well as the July employee incentive. So those numbers are starting to look holistic now by November. On page 3, we talk about the miscellaneous expenditure. That one's $1.8 million. We paid off the TIF. 2 of the TIFs were paid off, and then the $1.5 million to St. Louis County also sits in there. So those were some of the decisions that were made by November that are starting to reflect in November. Any immediate questions? Yes, ma'am.
It didn't sound like it, but is there anything outstanding that you don't think will come in that matters? I mean, there's some that are so small that are just a few $1,000s.
No, there's nothing that's actually giving me any alarm. I know that the Post Dispatch even posted sort of that the payments being made to St. Louis County and making their way via the mail. So normally by mid-February, we get all of the assessments in and the deposits are in, and we've gotten those. By mid-February, they're acting like there's some timing delays in that, but the auditors are fully aware of that. So I still think that those types of reconciliations are going to be timely enough for the audit. Nothing at this moment gives me alarm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions.
Next is the audit timeline.
Lead us
I'll
away.
go right ahead.
Yeah, please continue.
The timeline is posted in here. We are sticking to the timeline, working closely with the auditors currently. We've met the timelines that are currently posted on here for the January timelines and most of the February timelines. They have the compensated absences. They have the cash and investment reconciliations. The prepaids and the account payables, all of those have been sent this week. So I think this timeline should be fairly easy to keep. I expect us to once again have a, fingers crossed, fairly good, smooth audit. But as of today, we're working well and working towards that goal.
That's so nice to hear. Are there any questions on that? All right, great. Not seeing any questions, so I guess we'll just move on to the next item. Item 6 is the consent agenda. There are 2 items. The approval of the November and December minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to review those?
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, they stand approved. Item 7 on the agenda is old business. 7A, we have the employee benefits discussion and analysis. Who's leading us off with that? Come on down.
Firstly, I thank you for reading my novel. I know it's lengthy, and I promise I will not read from the memo. I will go over everything in order of how it was presented. If there's anything in particular you would want to start with, we can do that first.
My only comment would be that please feel free that as we move through the presentation, if you've got questions, I would treat it as an open forum to just feel free to ask your questions.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the communication of benefits. What we are aiming to do this year is just to expand on our current orientation process. I know in the memo it stated quarterly benefits meetings, but those are more orientation meetings that will discuss the benefits, the handbooks, things that we don't get to dive into when we have that hour and a half session when we have a new hire. It allows me to have a more one-on-one with the employee to talk about some of the unknowns, a lot of the things that came up in the benefit survey that employees weren't aware of. So by doing that quarterly as we have new hires, it gives new employees a chance to ask questions and current employees a chance to just refresh on what they may have missed. And so that's what we are going to start doing for 2025. Start the health reimbursement account. So the health reimbursement account is a current liability that we carry each year. Essentially, what it does is return employees if they use the out-of-pocket deductible from their health care. Right now, that amount is 75% for full-time employees, family, and individuals. Of that amount, I've went back and ran the numbers for 2022, 2023, and 2024, even though 24 is still open, just to show what the annual liability is and then what the actual expense incurred from those different years. So right now, we are looking at an increase annually. I do see that trend being as employees understand what the HRA does, how they can use it, who they can use it for. They're continuing to use it. I know the conversation or the question asked to me of could we reallocate those funds? They're not listed as an expense item to reallocate. It is a liability that's held that moves to an expense if it's utilized. Michelle, if I'm misstating that, please correct me. It's her dollars. So we look at roughly 250,000 liability annually, where we're only at this moment having the expense of 40,000, 45,000. Every employee has the option to use this. Our healthy employees, their families, they use it for whatever comes up. What I have found in my year here is that there wasn't great understanding of how to submit, how to go through the process. So for everyone that has come to me, we've walked through it, we've logged in, I showed them how to submit their request for the reimbursement, what can be submitted. So we're gradually increasing that expense. Hopefully employees will continue to use it and ask questions about it. I think it's a great benefit that we have.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I read through this, I felt like this is something that just isn't utilized, and it sounds like your education's really going to help, but this is a big benefit.
And it's a
that
huge
is
benefit.
just, if you have healthcare expenses and you're not turning this in, it's just money that you're not getting back as
Correct.
employees. So any education we can do on this seems like a really important thing for our employees, so.
Especially when we have those with family coverage. Right now, where we're only able to cover the 50% of the family medical, utilizing this benefit does offset as much as possible. So hopefully we can continue to increase that trend. Any questions?
I do have, I agree with that, and I want to back up just a little bit on the communication
Yes.
of benefits plan. And are you intending that this is going to, you said they're going to be mandatory meetings. Are they going to be held at one time where everybody has to come in? Are you having multiple ones? Are you going to each department?
No, it will be multiple, much like I did with open enrollment. I had multiple sessions, enough to cover the 3 shifts at fire, enough to cover the 2 shifts for PD. What I did with open enrollment was get with the department heads to see what time best suits their teams so that I can be present. For the other departments, I did go out to Parks and Recs, Public Works, and of course here to meet with the individuals.
One suggestion that I've seen in my professional life is recently, when we've done things like this, you do it over Zoom and you have it recorded, and then that way it's also somebody who may be not able to be there for a certain day can also sort of watch it, and then also it allows for people who, during the meeting, that maybe didn't quite understand something clearly, they can go back and watch that. So just
Absolutely.
a suggestion to
I like it.
record it and then be able to have it access for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you. So the additional supplemental or the voluntary benefits. Right now we have Voya, Colonial Life, Legal Shield. There's one more that I'm drawing a blank on. Okay. So Voya is our 457. We do have participation in the 457. There definitely is room for growth there. There leaves a lot to be desired. Last year, I took a big initiative and went out to the different departments, talked to them about 457. After the meetings, I asked Jeff to come on site so that he can meet with them to get them set up. If Jeff was here, he would tell you that he and I went back and forth for about 4 days because he wanted to show up for an hour because there wasn't a great turnout and historically for him. He did send the email stating that, it was his biggest turnout. I asked him to stay 4 hours, and he actually stayed 5, and he met with a lot of employees. And although everyone didn't sign up, they did get a better understanding, and we did see increase in participation. Again, it's one of those benefits that, as an individual who utilizes this benefit, it's great. When I know that there's areas that we potentially can't make changes to currently, this is one of those ways that we can do it for ourselves. Colonial Life, we added new riders for Colonial Life. One of the concerns or the conversations from the benefits survey was the short-term disability, where we have a 30-day waiting period. Well, the short-term disability for Colonial Life, individuals can sign up for that, carry it for if they know they have a procedure coming up in the next year, utilize the short-term disability to cover the 30 days that they are waiting for Lincoln Financial to kick in, and then once they've completed their procedure, they can then drop that rider. We added a hospital indemnity plan. We added additional dental plans to kind of work with Delta for those who have a lot of major oral procedures coming up, or for children if you have family, braces, things of that nature. We do have all of those as options, cancer, disability, all of those. Right now, every category has someone enrolled in it, and that's a good thing, especially with it being new. I did meet with Lisa mid-January just to see if there were other things that we can discuss. I look forward to meeting with her again just to continue expanding that benefit to employees. Any specific questions on? I'll save loggers since it's next on the agenda, if you're okay with that.
Yep, that's fine.
PTO, our paid time off. For Brentwood, we have vacation, sick, funeral, holidays, jury duty, voting leave. A big part of I will not read the different hours to you. I promise I won't do that. I will point out that in my memo, I had a typo, and thank you, Chief, for pointing that out. Firefighters earn half a day every month for 6 full days per year, not 12 full days per year. I did put the actual handbook verbiage in the memo, but I mistyped when I wrote that supporting paragraph for that. But on the screen, you see what is reflected is accurate. The conversation was, one, how can we increase it? Can we combine it? What are the ins and outs of that? When I review the comparators, some have a combined, many have separation. With the combination, the cities that I did pinpoint within the memo, you will see that they have the same amount of paid time off as our combined sick and vacation. One of the differences that we did see was the amount of rollover for vacation. Even with the combined, the amount of rollover was a little higher, meaning that they can carry over hours until the next year. The biggest caveat was that for the cities that allowed additional carryover, they did cap the payout when there was separations of services, just so that it wouldn't carry a higher liability than what's already incurred. The other downside to it, or I think finance would consider it a downside, is that when we have that increased carryover, the liability for vacation does increase. If you earned it at $20 an hour in 23 and you're taking the vacation in 24 and you're making $30 an hour, it's a higher liability. Any questions on the vacation portion?
Talked about it.
Am I talking too fast? I'm a little nervous up here.
You're doing great. Yeah, I think the PTO is always, especially with rollover or carryover, is always difficult because then you carry over a chunk and then it just pushes your current year further, and then you're carrying over more. It just kind of compounds.
Yeah.
So when we look at carryovers, do we have it to where there's a time limit that they have to use the carryovers by, or else then it just sort of?
Yes.
So, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Currently, they have to use it within the first quarter of the carryover. So PD and fire, they're on a Jan 1 accrual. They have to use it within the first 3 months. For all other employees, it's our anniversary date. We have to use it 3 months after.
Thank you.
Sick leave. Our sick leave is very comparable to the other cities. We do offer you earn up to 12 days a year, 960 hours, capping that out. Those sick leave can be used for family, a lot of different emergencies. I talked earlier about short-term disability, that 30-day waiting period. Essentially, using that sick leave is ideal for times like that. We've experienced employees who've had loss in their family the funeral, the bereavement leave of 3 days wasn't enough. They were able to use additional sick time just to maneuver through the ins and outs of, you know, caring for their loved one or the burial services. It's very comparable to the different cities. The conversation we had in regard to combining the two is it brought more questions than answers. What do we do for the employees that have been here, have so much tenure in all of these years? And if we combine it and now we cap it, do we pay out the difference? Do they lose the difference? I don't have the answers for that. I was not able to get information from the other cities of when they transitioned to PTO, a combined bank, how they handled it. It's something that I'd have to research further to see what would be ideal. Just from the reviews from the employee surveys, there was more against it than for it. I do believe the driving factor was the potential of losing hours they already have, especially if they were hired before 2013. So, Eric. Any questions on the vacation and sick? Okay. Holidays, and I'm going to talk on some of the highlighted portions in the memo or things that I have for consideration. We do get a lot of employees asking to carry over the hours vacation if they don't have it. Typically it's the 40 because the handbook does limit it right now to 40 hours. If it's something that we entertain and move forward with, it would allow myself and payroll to have our payroll system, ADP, automatically do that. Right now, it's a manual process, and we have to wait until the day after one's anniversary to add the hours. It's room for oversight, but Jim and I were very good at it. But if it's something that we actually take on and all employees are able to carry over that amount, the system would do that automatically. If we increase it to 80, same thing, again, there's a liability with the increased carryover. Another concern would be the overtime that would be created because now you have more vacation in the year that an employee has to take by a certain time. So the departments could potentially be short-staffed when they're taking those additional vacation hours that we roll over. So for the handbook, we would have to define terms of payable accruals if we allow additional carryover, understanding that if 40 or 80 hours are allowed to carry over and you separate your services with the city of Brentwood, your annual accrual is what your payout is, not that plus the carryover. And right now with the sick leave, we do not pay out if you are hired after April 1st, 2013. And so there would be no change in regard to that. For holidays, it's been a practice that, well, firstly, I'll start back. For holidays, there's only 2 of our comparators that offer more, potentially 3. One does a half day, one does a whole, and the other does 2. The biggest one that cities have been adding to their holiday list is Christmas Eve, typically because a lot of people already take it off, and many cities do give early dismissals. What I put together was a calculation for what that would look like for our uniformed employees. Right now, if we take a holiday or half and whole, they don't get that benefit of being off. We do pay them out for their holidays. So therefore, if it becomes something that we entertain or consider to move forward with, there is a dollar amount added to the budget line item for that particular item. So, questions with regard to holidays?
Well, I have a question about days off, and there was the really great chart that maybe some U City or some other city put together, but
Yes.
it was like a lot of stuff, and it didn't have I didn't notice a bottom line. So how do our days off total compare? Because I know we have a personal day and some don't have that.
So with that big chart, that was actually provided, I believe it's from Wentzville.
Oh, Wentzville, okay.
But that's what I used to kind of show that we are right there with everyone else. Wentzville was one that does a half Christmas Eve. I believe it may have been Clayton or someone that does a whole, and another one that does a whole day plus Good Friday, but they did not have the personal holiday. So we were equivalent in the fact that we have the personal holiday, and they had Christmas Eve and Christmas. So of that big chart, there were 2 that had more holiday days off than we do. Right now we have the 11. One had 11 and a half, the other had 12.
Okay, but then everybody else had 11 or less.
Or less,
Or
yes,
less, okay.
or
So
less.
we are at the top of the heap right now. It's just
Absolutely.
moving the day around.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on? All right, this is a fun one. So flexible work schedule and telework. Our handbook does not have a section that's that's completely dedicated to flexible work schedule or telework. That includes a 4-day work week. When we consider a flexible work schedule, I have an appointment at 4 p.m., so I asked my director if I could work through my lunch and leave early, or combine 1 hour of sick leave with a missed lunch to leave to go for that. We consider that a flexible working schedule. Maybe I can come in an hour early to leave an hour early to do a kids event. It's a flexible working schedule, and it's just a historical practice that department heads have been able to do, but it's done circumstantially. It's not an everyday, every week occurrence, but it's not written in the handbook. There isn't anything in our policy stating or defining that particular policy or principle, or practice rather. Remote access, there is a section in our handbook that talks about it. There is a form that we have to fill out for IT. For most of us, we do remote work when we need to, but not on a regular basis. It's not, I wake up Tuesday, I want to work from home. The conversation led to, well, what if I need to work from home? How do we address that? Is it something that we want to add and include in the handbook, that remote work is something you can do outside of it being circumstantial, like the snow event or a death in the family and you're in a different state, but there's a meeting that you need to participate in. For most of us, we do take our laptops home. If there's a work comp overnight, I need to be reachable. That's something that we do, but we do not have a current policy with regard to that. Another conversation was the 4-day work week, and honestly, there was not a lot of information available regarding that. Some cities have tried to do it, and they are doing it in part. One city particularly are doing, it's called a 3-month trial basis, and every 3 months, the employees that have defined positions that are eligible for a 4-day flex week where they work Monday through Thursday, and their team member is Tuesday through Friday, they have to reassess and reapply every 3 months. Some of the concerns that come up is, what about the holidays? If we use our team and our structure, for example, we have courts, there's 2 people within that department. If they're doing a 4-10 hours, a 4-day work week, 4-10s, if City Hall is closed at 5 most of those days, what are they doing for the 2 hours or the hours that the City Hall isn't open, but they're in the building? How do we address when there's a holiday on a Monday, but it's one of their Monday off? Do they then both work a Tuesday through Friday? So there's a lot of gray area. That one is something that it's definitely situational based, department based, and it's not for every person. I do fear that will cause a lot of animosity for those who cannot do it. It just,
Yeah, that's the concern I have, is so much of our staff is service-oriented that needs to be in the community.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have the luxury to be able to say, yeah, I'd like to do remote work.
yeah.
And this falls into one of those, yes, I know it's a little bit more modern kind of trend that we're seeing across the corporate world. But seems to me it's one of those that if it isn't broke, don't fix it type of situation. Like, unless there's people who are being discriminated against and are not allowed and others are, but it doesn't sound like that's a problem. And it sounds like the department heads are handling this already when needed for folks that need flexibility. So I don't know if that I would really recommend doing anything differently, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I'll echo in. I guess I sort of concur, because if citizens come in, we need to be able to serve them, whether it, whatever building, whatever department. But my question on the remote working is, there are days where, like the snow day, where it wasn't safe, where the call was for those employees who weren't critical to stay home. Do we need policies for days like that, or does it work just fine like it is? Okay, then that's, okay, great.
Tuition reimbursement. That was a very big topic brought up within the benefit survey. Right now, we currently compare our credit hour that we use. Each employee has up to $3,000 per year for 3 credit 3 credits per well, 3 semester credits, 3 credit hours. What I did was went back to UMSL. We do base that number off of UMSL. Many cities do, and pulled up their current 2024, 2025 year, what the rates are. So the number you see on the consideration side shows their maximum and their minimum. The minimum is for undergraduate class. The maximum does represent a class, credit hours for a graduate class. Right now, we are right in the middle of our comparators. You'll see some offering more than we do, and you definitely see some offering less than we do. Different caveats, some offer for books in addition to the tuition reimbursement. The biggest thing that was alike is there's always a reimbursement, repayment if you separate your services. The cap seems to be 2 years across the board, which is what we currently do as well. There's a different percentile as you near that 2-year mark. I don't think I can say much more on it without reading the screen. So, any questions on the tuition reimbursement? Questions on usage of it?
I'll just comment that, I mean, I know it wouldn't be until another budget year, but if $3,000 doesn't even cover 1 credit hour at UMSL for an undergraduate class, this just seems like something we should try to increase. And maybe we don't go all the way to a graduate class because that's really a big jump, and I don't know what that would do to department budgets, but
Let me clarify, I do apologize. So our current amount is 3,000 up to 3 credit hours. The number, the 3,726, that's the minimum amount for 3 credit hours. So that number does represent 3 credit hours.
right, but yeah, so what I'm saying is that
We don't
ought
have enough to
be-
cover 3.
We ought to be able to cover 3 at UMSL, and I think the fact that we have the retention requirement, but anything we can do to make our staff more educated, and this is a great benefit, and this seems like a really good thing for our employees and for the city. So maybe go to 4,000, or, maybe there's.
Well, I mean, I think that cuts both ways too. If they have skin in the game, if they gotta pay for a little bit of it, I mean,
Well, there's a commitment to the city too. I mean, if you leave, then you have to pay it back, so.
I think Tangela also provides in her survey what other cities are doing. Examples that she shares here are Ellisville, Wentzville, and Creve Coeur. And I zero in on Creve Coeur, particularly the fact that they pay additional for materials, books and things like that. So as you further this discussion, maybe you talk about what it
Modeling
should look like.
Modeling it
Modeling
after,
it, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, how about, I'll make a motion that we look at increasing the amount for tuition reimbursement and ask Tangela to present us with a recommendation at the next meeting.
Perfect.
Second, sorry.
Put it back to you.
motion second, any further discussion? Do we need to vote on that? I like a roll call on that?
No,
All
we'll
right.
just come back to you
Okay.
won't vote until she comes back with something.
Okay.
On-site training. I reached out to our personnel attorney to see what is required as a city and what is optional. So we do anti-harassment training, sexual harassment. After speaking with Brian, I was informed that it should be done annually. And then supervisory training should be done annually as needed. If we're not having new supervisor roles filled, then we won't need it. However, it's not a bad thing to do annually as a refresher, just like the benefits orientation sessions. Last year, we started additional trainings in the form of lunch and learns. And what we essentially did was provided a very cost-effective lunch, different topics, and invited employees out to participate with approval from their supervisors. We covered things. I had people come out from loggers. I had utilized our EAP services. People came out from West Community to talk about credit scores. So it was very all-around health-focused, mental, financial, educational. A lot of it did focus around the benefits. Again, Voya came out a lot. I wanted everyone to have a better understanding of our current benefits before expanding on other items. We did see a lot of participation within those lunch and learns, and we plan to continue those this year. Through our EAP services, we have a certain amount of hours that we already pay for. They come with our benefit that we use, so we can use them. West Community offers different presentations that are free. A lot of the presentations I utilized were free, and the only cost was for the meals that we prepared for them. I do still bring out the voluntary benefits. After last year's success, they have been asking when can they come out. So we're trying to get them scheduled so that we can continue educating our teams. Outside of that, each department they send their employees to different trainings based on what their department needs are, based on the budgets they have approved through the budget process.
That's great. And I love that you provide lunch. It's so really nice.
It was actually really fun.
And
Wellness.
to make benefits fun is
There's always a way. Wellness. So last year we developed an employee-based wellness committee. I literally sent out an email to all the employees and said, who has a few hours to commit to helping develop a way to utilize our wellness grant that we received through Slate. As you remember, last year I did come before you all requesting $6,000 that was then reimbursed to us, and we had a little fun, had the employees doing different challenges, winning raffle tickets, and someone won an electric bike, and it was pretty cool, and they had fun with it. We had a decent turnout. We plan to continue that this year. Another thing that we've included or started doing, continually doing, is sharing the different wellness flyers that Slate sends out to all of their participating cities. If you've never gotten the flyers, they are very interactive. They lead you to different works, different websites. There's always different recipes, and their slogan is live well, work well. So it's a very holistic approach, and we continue to share that with the employees. As we find more resources that we can use, that is our goal, is to continue to expand on that. This year, we are still developing what we plan to do for spring with the wellness grant, but that is an option for us this year as well. Again, the lunch and learns, we utilized that for one of them. We did the 7 dimensions of wellness. It was pretty fun. There were things that you didn't even think would be a concern, but employees were very pleased with it and asked to bring that back this year. So we'll likely see a similar presentation from EAP on wellness and mental health. Questions, comments on wellness? Employee recognition. Currently, at our employee luncheon, this is typically fall, we recognize employees who've had milestone years, 5, 10, 15, 20, increments of 5, and so forth. They receive a plaque. This year we did make it a little fancier, but they get a lunch, they get a plaque, and that's what we've historically done. In comparison to some of the cities that I included in the memo, some are doing a dollar value added as into a paycheck or gift card or even a catalog where they can order within a certain price range item when they hit those milestone years. I did reach out to personnel personnel attorney to make sure that was something that the city could do if we chose to improve on how we recognize our employees. One of the kickbacks or the concerns would be, how do we can't really look back on the employees that were not able to participate in the event if we adopt something new. But outside of that, the numbers that you see is our 2025 service year expectations in increments of 5, and that's just adding a 0 to that year of service. Likewise, if we were to give an option to pick an award from a book, we'd have to set categories on how much is the spending limit for each. But these are the different numbers if we were to entertain or consider something of that nature for 25, 26, and 27 as it currently is. Okay, I don't think I missed anything except loggers. Is there anything that I wanted to cover that I didn't touch on or to go back to?
Not seeing any.
Okay, so then I'll come back with information on the tuition reimbursement. Okay.
To the next item on item 7 in the agenda, which is the 2025 loggers topic.
Correct. So essentially when we did the budget, we go from an anticipated amount, We typically don't have that amount until later in the year. And so what we budgeted for, the loggers rate for 2025 came in higher than what we anticipated it would be. The spreadsheet or the chart that you see on the screen shows that when we do our budget, we do anticipate that the numbers will be higher. When we did so, we were able to capture that difference. So there's not a deficit created by the difference in the percentage rate for 2025. I think we'll use that as a milestone for when we do the report or the budget for 2026, aim a little higher than what we did for this year. Additionally, in conversation with the benefit survey, we were discussing what it looks like if the employees were to contribute. I did reach out to loggers to get unofficial estimates. The next section that you see shows what the increase would be. So the first row, the 2025 current loggers is 5.4%. With our staff as is, this does not include any overtime. This is straight salaries for 2025 with anticipation of the vacant positions being filled. The estimated cost for loggers is $269,000. If we shift over to the next column, that is for the employees. If they are contributing 2%, the increased accrued liability is $712,000 in addition to the $354,000, which would come at the rate of the city. It would increase for us to 7.1% from the 5.4%. The employees would then have to cover 2%. Their portion is not shown in this chart at all. The numbers that you see are specifically city amounts. So in addition to the 354, the accrued liability would be 700. That is an estimate. The estimate is gathered from data they had for February of 2024. If it was something that we wanted to get a true estimate, we can only do one a year, and they would then pull current data. Obviously, the February 2024, our salaries did not reflect anything from the new pay philosophy, so that's not reflected here. Neither is 2025. I imagine that number will be significantly higher than what it is now. Likewise, for the third column, when we're looking at employees contributing 4%. The caveat is that when the employees do contribute a higher percent, it does lower what the city will contribute. In addition, the addition amount is lower, but the amount itself is still higher. But these numbers are from February 2024 while using our current 2025 salaries.
Can you just explain the premise of why we would maybe want to open it up and have the employee contribution, what?
This was based on some of the feedback from the employees was that they wanted to see more contribution to loggers, and diving deeper into that conversation, were asked if they would be willing to contribute, as some cities have employee and employer contributions. And so because there was an amount of employees that stated they would, this was going in to see what that looked like for the employee and the employer. When the employees want to participate, there's an increased liability for the city in addition to what they contribute. And so this was to kind of show what that would look like if we were to consider it at the behest of the employees.
But the potential long-term benefit for the employee is that they're able to contribute more to loggers so that they get potentially faster investment and return on it.
Correct.
Down the road for retirement.
Yes. And one of the reasons why earlier in 24, I brought Jeff Prost, our Voya representative, in was because there was a lot of conversation about the lower percentage rate being contributed to loggers. And when I went to the different departments, I did a little scenario, showed them how to do their calculation, and showed them where they could potentially themselves participate in Voya until something is different. And if nothing is ever different, you can still do a participation on your own to,
They have a place to be able to
Yes.
invest, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so along that line with, because I remember, we looked at this a few years ago, and I remember it being so expensive, and here we are again, and it is just really an expensive bite. But with the employees able to do the 457, so if someone put 4% of their salary toward the 457, how does that compare, and to have the lower, our current, what were you, L12? So the current L12 payout from loggers plus the 4%, does that get
It
close
depends
to?
on what they would. it can get close or even be better depending on when they meet with Jeff and they set up their account. They can choose, just like any investment, if they want low risk, medium risk, high risk. So depending on whether they're putting their money into pre or post tax, that they have all different levels of play, I guess you can say, with that 4%. We don't have any, the only thing that we would do is pull it and send it to Voya on their account. Voya then puts their investments into the fund that they've selected, or the different funds that they've selected. So they have the ability to go in and change it, whereas they don't really get to do that with loggers. It's where it goes is where it goes.
And then are they able to put in, what percentage of salary are employees able to put in if they chose to
As
put?
minimum, for 457?
457.
As minimum if they want, or as max if they want, until they reach that annual maximum.
Okay, so even though we're only in an L12 for loggers, we do have ability for employees to put more money pre-tax aside toward
ma'am.
retirement. So
Really.
okay, I think as long as I've been trying to understand this, I'm not really sure I ever knew we had the 457. So I just really thought, okay, the non-uniform, we have sort of a second to none uniform retirement plan, and we actually have a decent one for non-uniform, and I just never really realized about the 457. So that makes, understanding that makes me feel a lot better.
It doesn't. That was a question that the employees had too. Some of them didn't understand that they did not have a certain amount they had to use. I told them, you can start with $10 and you won't see it. And as we got near to adopting a new pay philosophy, I said, this is a time to now jump on that. You won't see the change in your paycheck if you wanted to contribute. So some employees did do that whenever we adopted the new pay philosophy. So they are learning, they're asking the questions, they're getting the information, and I'm hopeful they'll continue to participate in those supplementals.
I just like to say the thing that I've learned the most today is how much good communication is going on from you to the staff, and I think that's a really positive change that I've seen since you've been here. So thank you.
I'm less nervous when I'm one-on-one with them than I am in
You
front
don't
of
see
you all.
you don't seem nervous.
Any additional questions on loggers?
Not seeing any.
Thank you.
You don't need any, there's no motion or anything that's needed, I think.
Informational, unless there's some further inquiry or investigation you all would like to see.
No, and
Okay.
I'm not recommending
Great.
any
It means
changes to what we have right now.
benefits look pretty great. All right, well, we will move on to new business. Item 8A, sanitation, bulk items, operational and billing procedures.
I'm going to field this one. I am looking to change the procedures for bulk pickup. And based upon the memo and how it's outlined, currently we bill after the fact and we carry an AR balance. And the AR balance is growing, meaning, in layman's terms, that we are billing people and they're not paying their bills. And then there's sort of no mechanisms to track them down or to find them or to make them. So I've spoken with Public Works, even Planning and Development, and going through MyGov, and the current recommendation is to start to outline a process to actually use MyGov to request the bulk trash pickup as well as take payment at that time, which will start to eliminate adding to the AR and then give me the potential opportunity to come up with a better process to address the outstanding AR. As outlined, we currently, for the end of 2024, have an outstanding balance of $169,000. It grew by about $37,000. It must also be noted that $15,000 of that was associated with a couple of housing and facilities through planning and development, and there are liens on those properties. But there was a good growth of about $22,000 in billing. If that's the potential growth on the ongoing basis, yes, hands, yes.
So as the situation currently stands, if I call up the city and say, hey, come get my piano,
Yes,
you pick it up and you
Yes.
send me a bill for
Yes.
$2,000 and I never pay it.
correct.
And eventually that can become a lien on my real estate.
No,
Maybe.
not for the trash pickup, but for anything that was through planning and development where they had homes that required us to have to clean them and take
Okay,
on
so
that
the
bill.
lien's
So
only
these are two
abatement
different,
issues.
yes,
So-
but they are both sitting in this receivables account.
Okay.
So, but
you'd
the-
have to sue me to get, if I'd ever
done that
paid,
yet.
to get me to pay for the, is that, am I
Or,
understanding?
or
like-
potentially try to find you. I think those who live in some of the apartments say they come and put their bulk trash out and then leave. Then, once again, if there's turnover in the homes or in the facilities, then we don't necessarily know that. But if we can capture payment ahead of time, and then through MyGov, there is the opportunity that if they don't get picked up or they decide not to put their stuff out, we can do the refunding through MyGov as well. So we have the mechanisms to sort of say, circumstance changed and we can change with that. Right now, we don't do multiple billing through the receivables. We don't sort of go back through. And that's still just some of the internal processes that I'm sort of picking up and figuring out how to address. But the best sort of approach to not let this grow or continue to put us in this sort of archaic system is to ask them to pay ahead of time and potentially use MyGov. Using MyGov will be a different approach for the citizens as well. So we plan to potentially work with Michelle Boyer, sort of do some announcements. And then those who won't use MyGov, they can still call. The front desk will take them, do the ticket for them, take their payment for them. So those who don't computer, we will assist them and help them to make this as painless as possible. The real consideration is, can we take payment prior to pickup versus after pickup and then sort of not collecting the payment?
So, yeah, I'm gonna say we will get, like, we're gonna hear complaints about this because
yeah,
MyGov's hard to
yes.
use. But this, like, when I go and tell someone that, you know, we have almost $170,000 that people haven't paid, they're gonna have to adjust. And as long as you feel like there are systems within City Hall that can help people who don't do computer stuff, or if, like, you leave a couch out and then all of a sudden somebody takes the couch before.
We've talked about that as well.
And so
yes.
then if you could call and say, you know, the city didn't take my couch, the neighbor took my couch, and then get a reimbursement, as long as that mechanism is there, it sounds like you've really thought this through, and I think we just have to do this, because I had no idea that this was, that
Well,
people
I
were
think that's
not
part of the
paying.
process. I don't think anybody had any real idea. And as you know, I sort of continue to settle in and touch different parts of this and see different parts of this. And now that I'm doing AR since the position's open and doing billing, and so some of these are eye-opening. But I think working with the other departments, I also plan to go speak at Public Works at the Public Works Committee, yes, and sort of make the same sort of have the same discussion. But as you've indicated, we do know that there will be some uneasiness with this. But at what point does it make more sense?
Michelle is not proposing writing off that balance either. So I hope you agree that when we communicate with those who we believe owe the city, however long it's been, we're going to try to collect it.
They still owe, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a little more insight on AR. Currently, the internal software that we use is migrating over and going to web-based, and AR is the last component to do that. But we don't do secondary billing either. So really, we send one bill, and then that's it. So I'm hoping to get some type of mechanisms that will just start to, even for older bills, that we'll just we'll resend them and see what that soft billing, as you would, and see what that collection rate starts to look like. So internally, there are some further thoughts that we have. And back to Bola's point, we're not writing these off. But I'd like to not add to it. I'd like the consideration that to know that people will be uneasy and we're willing to sort of have that conversation knowing what the background looks like.
This certainly seems like a no-brainer, and a pretty obvious solve for a very interesting problem. I mean, have we talked to other cities that have this situation where they have their own trash pickup and they might have to do this? Certainly there's,
Dan, there's only 4 of us
yeah,
that
true.
still provide this. Did you talk to anybody?
I didn't talk to him, but I know that service, so you get the
Right. Right, but you're paying for it up front, and in this situation where, you know, it's a special pickup, so we have to charge for it. I get that. I also would be curious on whether or not for those situations where I order it. I also put out, hey, there's free cycle if somebody wants something, and then somebody picks it up. Question that I have is, could you take the card and it only gets billed the moment, we pick it up? And that way you're not trying to get into refunding and different things. So somehow is there a way to know that staff has picked it up? So yes,
Well, there's a
that should be billed.
GPS. Do you want to?
Or
Dan's
is it
coming up.
tonight, like generally develop the process and come back to us with these permutations?
Isn't
mean, is
that your idea?
I just don't want to I don't want to
supportive of
create a situation where we're getting into,
Stuff
I
later.
need a refund
First.
because I don't think city picked it up and.
Well, and I think we know internally that we're going to have some of that, which is how we know that MyGov does the refunding, but I don't know that we can potentially slot it to be picked up through MyGov, which then triggers the ticket to go to Public Works, but the payment is also what triggers it. It's sort of like in MyGov, because mainly it does permits, you
Pay for the permit,
you do
right.
the application, you pay for it, and then the permit is issued. So I think that that's sort of the steps inherently attached to MyGov. Once again, we can look further into that and try and find out, but.
What made me think of it is when you buy something that is then shipped somewhere, you don't get charged until it's shipped, and then it's like, okay, now I'm.
But knowing that they sort of do weekly once again,
We
weekly
true up the
pickups and,
list
yes.
too, so if you put, I've got a lawnmower and a box spring, chances are the lawnmower, someone's gonna see it and want the parts and it's gone. But you would have already paid for those 2 items, then you would get the refund. But the driver's supposed to true up the list, so if it says box spring and lawnmower, if one's missing, circle it, hand it back into finance that.
Yeah, so
Get
we
it.
wouldn't rely on the resident to even sort of notice,
Yeah.
to notify us, because the listing would come
Okay,
from
perfect.
MyGov directly to Public Works, and then
Right.
they'll true up with us, so the refunds could sort of happen
Right.
without them having to trigger us. Once again,
Sounds like the
yeah,
system's.
I'm not really sure about the system yet, but I just sort of know that internally this feels like the right start.
Well, and this made me think of, like maybe you do the lawnmower and the box spring, but then you decide you also want to put on a mattress. And so then if your guys are like noting what they are, and you're like, oh, they only paid for these two items, but there's a third one out there, if there's also a way to be sure that we're
Yeah, we turned
appropriately
the
billing
tickets back
people.
in, so we'd have to do the
And
same
it has
thing.
that capability as well.
Okay.
So when we spoke with Planning and Development, who sort of oversees MyGov and its functionality, it works both ways.
Okay.
So as long as, depending on how the itemized lists come back, if there are adjustments to be had, we would make those adjustments through MyGov, whether it's the additions or subtractions accordingly.
So for purposes of tonight, do you need a motion from us to develop a system and come back, or are you ready to? Is
Well,
the system developed,
It,
or?
it would be nice to get a sense of whether you support this, because we will also be taking it to Public Works Committee, and it'd be nice to be able to say that there's concurrence on,
And it's
Well,
potentially,
you've got concurrence.
and it's a policy change.
The committee, except
Am
for.
I the only one that's
Yes.
not on Public Works?
Talk to the chairman of Public Works.
Works, yeah.
And it's a policy change. Internally, this would be a policy change for us, so I would think some type of acknowledgement of it, and as well as just for the residents as we start to sort of form that communication, just some, because once again, we're going to start to bill ahead of time versus bill later. That's a policy change.
So if I said we'd entertain a motion to approve developing a policy change for bulk trash pickup in a way consistent with the memo.
Perfect.
I'll make that motion.
Second that
All
motion.
right, we got a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion?
No discussion, just a comment on the collection on outstanding balances. Maybe an attempt to collect more of it after a second, third attempt. If we don't get any response, submit to credit reporting agencies. I would imagine that would increase the amount we'll get back.
We've talked about some of that, and then internally, most of these are $15. So, as you start to talk about the equity internally, but yes, absolutely. We are talking about some of, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Is there, and it's a question, I don't want it to become a separate motion, but like, surely there's a lawyer out there that would be like, let me take this on and I keep 30% of what I collect. I mean,
His name is city attorney.
so, I mean, I would think that there is, I'm not throwing my law firm's hat into the ring, but like, there's gotta be like, you know, that could help, that maybe, you know, they have processes.
I think it's one of these things that has sort of just been slightly ignored in the processes, and we're going to bring it back up, and we're, like I said, even first, second, third billing and some soft billing mechanisms, hopefully we'll start, and taking payment ahead of time, I think we'll start to chip away at this and just come up with better processes. Great, thank you.
All right, do you need a roll call on that? I guess since it's a policy
Yes,
change? Okay,
yes.
roll call, or, I'm sorry, are there any further, I'm not seeing any further questions. Roll call, please.
Chairman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderman Erger.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote 4-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is citizen comment. Do we have anyone in the gallery or online that would care to address this committee? If so, you'll come forward, state your name, address. You'll be given, what is it? 3 minutes to respond?
Good evening. Darren Chavis, Brentwood Fire Department, represent the professional firefighters of Brentwood, Missouri. First of all, I just want to thank Tangela for the tremendous amount of work that it took, I know, to put that benefit analysis together. That's really beneficial in education for our people. I think that'll help us a lot with presenting that to them. I share all this information with them in hopes to help answer a lot of unresolved questions. So big thank you to her. One thing I would like to address just for this committee to consider is potentially looking at our sick leave accrual. Obviously, with our unique schedule, we do 48-hour shifts, so one shift day or 1 day, business day for us is 24 hours. Excuse me. So to be in line with the 8 hours, so 1 day accrual per month per all other city employees, it would be really beneficial for our staff and because of what we would have to take off if we were injured or sick to be in line with that. So one 24-hour shift accrual per month, per year, with still maintaining that maximum of sick time accrual. One other additional thing, first off, huge thanks for the consideration for tuition reimbursement. I recently completed a graduate degree, so that would have been very beneficial. But, you know, paying for one class versus me paying almost all of it out of pocket on my own, you know, it's something that I think would be great for our department and for our members. So thank you for that. One of the other things I wanted to just put on your guys' radar is, let me find my notes real quick. Oh, the premiums. I know we kind of talked about this before in previous meetings, but just the premiums of what family members are paying. And I don't know, Tangela might have the numbers on this, but what percentage of our employees are getting 100% of their benefit paid for versus how many of us are family members? I myself have a family, so seeing maybe additional premiums paid, so I'm not paying the full 50%, could help offset. I know it's just something that's been brought up by our membership, so just something we'd ask you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the gallery or online? You'll just need to come forward and state your name and address.
Hi, Julia Schlegel, and I live in Richmond Heights. I grew up in Brentwood, and I know this is not the appropriate meeting, but I saw that you were having a meeting, and I tried to talk to the city hall, and I went to the police station, and I've been trying to get somebody to help me. My car is being held hostage by you guys. I guess the police department. It was parked because it died on me, and during the winter weather, I wasn't able to get it, and nobody told me, nobody made any attempt to tell me, and it's been towed. The tow company, the police department told me to go get it at the tow company. I was going to do that. They told me it was $1,000. I thought that was kind of a lot, and the tow company won't let me get it because I have to get permission, and I left a message with the police chief, but I can't get anybody to do anything, so I'm here. I know you guys aren't the people, but I thought maybe there was somebody who could direct me or help me.
Well, probably if you'd like to talk to that officer in the meeting, this is really more, this isn't a question answer session.
Right, no, I just thought I wasn't going to get up at the end, but since you said it was a citizens meeting. You're Kelly, the one?
Okay, is there anyone online or?
No, ma'am.
All right, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.